The world stopped when Jacqueline Mimi Torres was found. It was a day no one in New Britain, Connecticut would ever forget. The sun was setting when police made a discovery that would change everything. Behind a broken-down house, hidden away in a plastic container, lay the lifeless body of a 12-year-old girl. Her name was Jacqueline, but everyone called her Mimi. When her family heard the news, their hearts shattered. Mimi had been missing for months, and no one knew what had happened to her. How could something so awful happen to someone so young? She was just a little girl, with dreams and hopes, and now she was gone. The shock was too much for everyone. Neighbors, friends, and family were stunned. The thought that something so terrible could happen in their quiet town didn't make sense. How could anyone hurt an innocent child like Mimi? People whispered in disbelief, but the truth was too real to deny. Her family, especially her father, Victor Torres, couldn't understand. How had his little girl, whom he loved, been taken from him so suddenly? And how could her mother, Carla Garcia, have let this happen? No one could believe it. This was a mother who should have protected her, and yet she was the one arrested for her daughter's death. Mimi's death wasn't just the loss of one child. It was a tragedy that reached deep into the heart of the community. People held their loved ones a little tighter that day, realizing how precious and fragile life truly is. No one ever expected something like this to happen. Mimi was supposed to grow up, go to school, make friends, and live a long, happy life. But instead, her life was cut short in the most heartbreaking way. Everyone who knew Mimi was left asking, how could this happen? How could a little girl like her be taken away from us so soon? The pain was unbearable, and the world seemed to stand still as everyone tried to process the loss of an innocent child. Jacqueline, or Mimi as everyone called her, was just 12 years old, but she had a heart full of dreams and a spirit that could light up any room. To the world, Jacqueline was just a name, another face in the crowd. But to her family, she was everything. She was their joy, their sunshine, and the hope of their future. Everyone who met her couldn't help but smile because she was the kind of person who made people feel happy just by being around. Mimi was a kid who loved school. She wasn't the type to sit quietly in the corner. Instead, she was always excited about learning. Her favorite subjects were science and art, where she could draw colorful pictures of the world around her. She dreamt of becoming an artist one day, maybe even drawing for a magazine or making her own cartoon characters. In her heart, she believed anything was possible if you worked hard enough. She wasn't just a dreamer, though. Mimi had the ability to make friends easily. At school, she had a small group of best friends who always had her back. They would spend their lunch breaks talking and laughing, making plans for the future, or just enjoying being kids. Mimi loved playing outside after school, running around with her friends, or riding her bike around the neighborhood, her laughter echoing down the street. Everything about her seemed full of life, as though the world was her playground, and she could do anything she set her mind to. Mimi also had a soft spot for animals. She would often come home with stories of stray cats she'd found and tried to help. She would beg her parents for a pet, saying, "Please, can I keep him? Just for a little while." Her room was filled with little trinkets and stuffed animals she had collected over the years, each one telling a story of her kind heart and caring nature. If you ever felt sad or upset, Mimi was the type of person who would come up to you, give you a big hug, and ask what was wrong. She didn't know how to stop herself from caring about people. Her family would often find her sitting quietly in her room, drawing or daydreaming about the future. They'd peek inside and see her with a big smile, lost in her own little world. Her mother, Carla, used to smile when she saw Mimi like that, thinking about how lucky she was to have such a sweet and loving daughter. But even though they had their good moments, there were darker times too. Times when Mimi seemed sad for no reason. Sometimes, when she thought no one was looking, she would wipe away a tear from her cheek or pull her blanket a little tighter around herself at night. No one knew why, and no one asked. But Mimi always managed to keep her sparkle, even when she felt like something was wrong. What made her even more special was how she treated other people. She was kind to everyone she met. No one was ever left out when Mimi was around. Whether you were the new kid at school or someone who just needed a friend, Mimi was the first to walk over and say, "Hey, want to sit with me?" She was the kind of person who made you feel like you mattered, no matter who you were or where you came from. But just like that, everything changed. One day, Mimi disappeared. A girl who had so much life, so many dreams, so many people who loved her, gone in the blink of an eye. The fun, carefree child who always seemed so full of energy and joy was no longer around to share her laughter. It was as if the world had lost its color, and no one understood how or why something so terrible could happen to someone so innocent. My dear friend, before we jump into this tragic story, I ask you to take several important actions. Please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this story. Every single share reaches more people who might recognize these warning signs and save a child. In the comments, write your city and viewing time. This helps me understand when it's best to publish similar investigations so they reach the maximum number of people and can save children's lives. My channel does well to bring you stories about children who needed protection but didn't get it. Each such investigation is not just a story about tragedy. It's a lesson in recognizing dangerous situations. Be sure to watch other videos on the channel because knowing about cases like these could one day help you notice warning signs and protect a child who's in danger. Thank you for your support. Jacqueline Mimi Torres didn't live in a perfect world. While many kids dreamed of having a happy, safe home where love was easy to find, Mimi's home wasn't like that. Her family, the people who were supposed to protect and care for her, were broken in ways that Mimi couldn't fix, no matter how hard she tried. Her mother, Carla Garcia, was supposed to be her biggest protector. Mimi looked up to her mom, hoping she would always be there to care for her. But things were never as they seemed. Carla was often distant, and there were times when Mimi would beg her for attention, to talk, or even just to spend time together. But Carla was busy, distracted, and sometimes too tired to listen. It was as if the love Mimi needed was always out of reach, no matter how much she wished for it. Mimi would often find herself alone, even when her mom was home. Her heart ached for someone to show her that she mattered, that she was loved. She dreamed of a mom who would sit with her, help her with her homework, and tell her bedtime stories. But Carla was often too caught up in her own problems to see what Mimi was going through. There were days when Carla would snap at Mimi, and other times when she seemed completely absent. Mimi would go to her mom for comfort, only to feel ignored. Mimi's heart ached because she wanted the kind of relationship with her mom that other kids seemed to have. A bond that was built on love, support, and care. Instead, she felt like an afterthought in her mother's life, someone who was pushed aside when she needed help the most. Mimi didn't understand why her mom treated her like this. She didn't understand why it was so hard to get the love and attention she deserved. And she didn't know why, despite her best efforts to be good and make her mom proud, things never seemed to get better. But it wasn't just Carla that Mimi had problems with. Mimi also had a strained relationship with her father, Victor Torres. Her father wasn't there for her the way a dad should be. For a long time, he had been out of her life, leaving her to deal with everything alone. She hadn't seen him for months, and when she did, it was never for long enough to make up for the time lost. He was often distant, and when he did come around, it felt like he didn't really understand her needs or her pain. Mimi would try to reach out to him, but it always seemed like he was too busy, too far away, or too wrapped up in his own world. There were times when she felt like he didn't care about her at all, and that made her heart hurt even more. She would sometimes wonder if he even remembered that she existed, or if she was just another forgotten part of his life. The worst part about her relationship with her father was that it wasn't just about being distant. It was about being neglected. Sometimes, when Mimi needed him the most, he wasn't there. She couldn't understand why he didn't care enough to check on her, to see how she was doing, or to tell her that he loved her. And worse, there were times when his presence actually made things worse. Instead of feeling safe and loved, Mimi often felt afraid, like she was walking on eggshells around him. When Victor was around, there were times when his anger would spill over, and he would take it out on her. Mimi didn't understand why her father would hurt her with his words or with his actions. She was just a child, and all she wanted was to feel loved and safe. She wanted a father who would listen, protect her, and show her the care that every child deserves. But instead, she got hurt and confusion. Mimi's life should have been filled with love, care, and protection from the people who were supposed to be there for her. She deserved a mother who would smile at her, tell her she was special, and take time to make her feel safe. She deserved a father who would take her hand, talk with her about her day, and let her know she was important to him. But instead, Mimi found herself living a reality that was far from her dreams. Her life was one of loneliness, sadness, and confusion. The love she deserved was always out of reach, and no matter how much she wanted things to be different, they never were. Mimi would sit alone in her room at night, wishing for a different life, one where her family was whole, where love flowed easily, and where she didn't feel like she had to fight for attention or affection. But no matter how hard she tried, the love and care she needed always seemed so far away. And so, Mimi continued to dream of the life she deserved. She kept hoping that one day things would change, that her family would come together, and that she would finally feel the love she had been searching for. But that day never came. Instead, Mimi had to face the harsh reality that the people who were supposed to love her most couldn't or wouldn't be there for her in the way she needed. She deserved better. She deserved more. But instead, she got pain, loneliness, and a family that failed her at every turn. And no matter how much she wished for a better life, it was always just out of her reach. Mimi's life wasn't as simple as it seemed. On the outside, everything looked okay. She went to school, played with her friends, and laughed just like any other 12-year-old. But behind closed doors, things were different. No one knew the secret pain she carried with her every day. The things she had to face, the things she had to hide, were invisible to everyone around her. She suffered in silence, hidden in plain sight. To her friends and teachers, Mimi was just another kid at school. She smiled when people asked how she was doing and laughed when they told jokes. But the truth was, every day was a struggle for her. At home, she wasn't the happy, carefree girl she appeared to be. She lived in a world where she was often left alone, ignored, and treated like she didn't matter. It wasn't like there were big, obvious signs of abuse. There were no loud fights, no bruises or broken things you could see right away. Instead, there were smaller, quieter things that happened when no one was looking. Mimi would often look sad and tired at school, but she'd hide it with a smile. Sometimes she would be absent for a few days, and no one would ask why. It was like she was just another face in the crowd, easy to overlook. When she was at school, she'd try to do her best, but the truth was she was exhausted. She was exhausted from not knowing what would happen at home, from never knowing if she would feel safe or if she would be heard. At home, there were many days when Mimi went without what she needed. She didn't have clean clothes like the other kids, and her hair was often messy. She didn't have someone to sit down with her and help her with her homework. Instead, she was left to figure it out on her own, trying to make sense of things that were way too big for her to handle. She knew what it was like to feel invisible, to feel like no one cared if she was okay. Sometimes she didn't even have enough food to eat. But Mimi didn't complain. She never asked for much, because she knew that no one would listen anyway.
Even though Mimi's teachers and friends saw her acting different sometimes, they didn't really know what was going on. She kept her problems hidden from everyone. It wasn't because she didn't want help. It was because she didn't think anyone would help her. She felt trapped in her own life, and she didn't know how to ask for the help she needed. Every time someone asked her if she was okay, she just said, "I'm fine," and smiled, even though inside she was hurting. The scariest part was that there were people who could have helped her. There were signs that could have been seen if anyone had looked closely enough. Mimi's teachers noticed she was tired and quiet sometimes, but they didn't ask enough questions. They thought she was just shy or tired from playing outside. Mimi's friends noticed she was often alone at recess, but they didn't think much of it. They just figured she wanted to be left alone. Her neighbors saw her walking home from school by herself, but they never stopped to ask if she needed help. All these small things added up, but no one knew how bad things were for Mimi at home. There were also bigger signs that no one really paid attention to. The fact that her father, Victor Torres, was barely in her life should have been a red flag. Mimi didn't see her dad much, and when she did, he wasn't very kind. He didn't check on her, ask how her day went, or even try to spend time with her. He didn't seem to care. And then there was her mother, Carla. Carla was often distracted, distant, and not very present. She didn't take the time to see how badly her daughter was suffering. Instead of asking Mimi how she felt or what she needed, she was too wrapped up in her own world. Despite all these signs, no one stepped in. Authorities could have done something, but they didn't. They had the chance to help Mimi, to see that something wasn't right in her home, but no one did anything. Teachers, neighbors, and even friends might have noticed something was off, but they all thought it was just a phase, or that Mimi was just being a typical quiet kid. No one connected the dots. No one saw how bad it really was. Mimi was invisible to everyone around her, and it seemed like no one cared enough to look deeper. This is the part that's the hardest to understand, how people can miss something so important. It's easy to think that everything is okay, especially when someone is trying to hide their pain. But sometimes, the most important signs are the ones that are hidden in plain sight. Mimi didn't have bruises, and she didn't scream for help, but that doesn't mean she wasn't suffering. Sometimes people need help even when they're not asking for it out loud. And for Mimi, that help never came in time. Mimi lived in a world where she had to hide her struggles, her sadness, and her pain. The love and care she deserved were always just out of her reach. Her life could have been different if someone had seen the signs, if someone had stepped in and asked the right questions. But for Mimi, that never happened. And in the end, she suffered in silence, hidden in plain sight, unable to escape the pain that no one could see. Now we have the chance to look for the signs that others miss. If we pay attention, if we care, we can make sure that other children like Mimi don't have to suffer alone. Mimi's final days were nothing like the way a child's life should have been. She should have been spending her time playing with friends, laughing, and dreaming about the future. But instead, she lived in a world of darkness and pain, far from the love and care every child deserves. It's hard to imagine what Mimi was going through in those last days. She was just 12 years old, too young to be carrying such heavy burdens. In the last months of her life, she wasn't allowed to be the happy, carefree girl she should have been. Instead, she was alone, hurt, and trapped in a life that no one knew about. Mimi's body was hidden away in the basement, a sad symbol of the neglect and abuse she had suffered for so long. She was tucked away, like something no one wanted to deal with, far from the world that should have been her home. No one knew what was happening in the dark corners of that house. No one could hear her cries. No one could see the pain behind her eyes. Mimi was alone, and there was no one there to help her. She deserved love. She deserved a family that would protect her, hold her when she was scared, and tell her everything would be okay. But instead, she was left to suffer in silence, hidden from the world. The basement became her prison, and the people who were supposed to protect her were the ones causing her the most harm. It's heartbreaking to think about the last moments of Mimi's life. Was she scared? Was she wondering why no one was there for her? Did she hope that someone would come to save her? No child should ever have to feel like that. Mimi was just like any other girl. She deserved to be loved and cared for, to feel safe, and to know that her family had her back. But she didn't get any of that. Instead, her life was taken, not by accident, but by the cruel hands of those who should have protected her. Sometimes, when people are treated badly for a long time, they start to feel like they aren't important. Maybe Mimi started to believe that no one would care if she was gone. It's hard to think about, but it's the reality she lived in. She should have been the most important thing in the world to her mom and dad. She should have been treated like the precious, irreplaceable child that she was. Instead, she was treated like she didn't matter. Mimi's life didn't have to end like this. There were so many moments in her life when things could have been different. If only her mom, Carla, had noticed the signs. If only someone had asked, "Are you okay, Mimi?" If only someone had stepped in and said, "We're here for you," things might have turned out differently. She might have had the chance to grow up, to chase her dreams, to make friends and to find happiness. Instead, she was left to deal with pain and loneliness on her own. In the end, Mimi's life was taken too soon. Her dreams were never realized. Her laughter was never heard again. She was just a little girl who deserved so much more than what she got. But no matter how hard she fought, no matter how much she tried to survive, she couldn't escape the harsh reality that she was living in. The people who should have been there for her, who should have protected her, were the ones who hurt her the most. And so, Mimi's life came to a sad and tragic end. Her body was hidden away, just like the love she should have had. No one was there to hold her hand, to tell her she was safe, or to promise her that things would get better. But we can't forget her. We can't let her story fade away. We have to remember the kind of life she should have had, and we have to keep telling her story so that other children don't have to go through the same thing. Mimi's death wasn't just about the end of her life. It was about the failure of the people who were supposed to love and protect her. It was about the broken promises, the silence, and the pain that she carried all alone. We have to learn from her story, to be aware of the signs of neglect, and to never turn away when a child needs help. No one should ever feel invisible. No child should ever have to suffer like Mimi did. And we should all remember that, no matter what happens, we can always make a difference in someone's life, just by showing them that we care. Mimi's life was taken, but her story is not over. It's up to us to make sure that no child is ever forgotten again. The day Mimi was found was a day no one in New Britain, Connecticut would ever forget. It started out like any other day, but by the end, everything had changed. A discovery was made that would shake the whole town to its core, and the people who loved Mimi would never be the same again. It was behind an old, abandoned house where her remains were found. A plastic container had been hidden in the backyard, tucked away from the world, just like the pain Mimi had been feeling for so long. Inside that container was the lifeless body of the 12-year-old girl who had been missing for months. The shock hit everyone hard, and no one could believe what they were hearing. For weeks, people had been wondering where she was, but now the truth was out, and it was worse than anyone could have imagined. When the police arrived and made the discovery, the world seemed to stop. Mimi's name had been whispered so many times before, but now it was no longer a mystery. The little girl who had disappeared so suddenly, the one everyone had hoped would come home safe, was gone forever. Her family's worst fear had come true. They had been holding on to hope, praying she would be found alive, but now it was too late. Mimi's family felt the pain deep in their hearts. Her father, Victor, could barely speak when he heard the news. He had been waiting, hoping, and praying that his daughter would come back. But instead, all he could do was stand there, frozen in shock. His heart shattered as he realized that his daughter, the little girl he loved, was never coming home. The pain of losing her was too much for him to bear. Her mother, Carla, was in a state of disbelief. She couldn't believe that something so horrible had happened to her own daughter. She was filled with guilt and sadness, wishing she could have done more, wishing she had been the mother Mimi needed. But it was all too late. The child she should have protected was gone, and nothing could change that now. Mimi's friends at school were just as heartbroken. They had been praying for her, hoping she was just lost, that she would come back. But when they found out the truth, their hearts broke. They had lost a friend, someone who had been there for them when they needed her, someone who had a big heart and always made everyone feel special. Her absence left a hole in their lives that would never be filled. The whole community was in shock. New Britain was a small town, and everyone knew each other. When something bad happened, it affected everyone. People stood in silence, unable to speak, feeling the weight of the loss. Mimi had been a part of their town, a part of their lives, and now she was gone. The whole town grieved together, because in a way, they had all lost something important. The moment when the police confirmed that Mimi's body had been found was a turning point. The worst fear of everyone who had been looking for her was now reality. Mimi's name had been whispered so many times before. Where was she? What had happened to her? But now, it was too late. It was too late to save her, too late to change what had happened. The town could only mourn her, remembering the life she had lived and the love she had brought to those around her. It was heartbreaking for everyone involved. There were no words that could ease the pain of losing a child. There was no way to bring Mimi back, no way to fix what had happened. Her family would never be the same. Her friends would never forget her. The town would carry the weight of her loss forever. Mimi's story was one of tragedy, and the pain of losing her would never fully go away. Her family, her friends, and the whole town had lost someone who should have been protected, someone who deserved to grow up and live a full life. But now, all they could do was remember her, mourn her, and make sure that no one ever forgot the little girl with the big heart who was taken from them too soon. Their worst fears were confirmed, and there was no going back. But as they grieved, they knew they had to honor her memory. They had to make sure that Mimi's story wasn't forgotten, and that people would learn from what happened to her. Mimi deserved to be remembered, and no one would let her be forgotten. When Mimi's body was found, the pain was just beginning for her family. They had lost her, but the shock didn't stop there. Soon after the discovery, something no one expected happened. Mimi's own mother, Carla Garcia, was arrested. So was her aunt, Jacqueline Garcia, and even a man named Jonathan Nanita, who had been close to their family. They were all charged with something unimaginable: murder, cruelty to a child, and tampering with evidence. The whole town was shocked. It was hard to believe that someone who should have loved and protected Mimi was now the one being blamed for her death. Carla, Mimi's mother, the woman who was supposed to care for her and keep her safe, had become the one responsible for her pain and suffering. It didn't make sense. People couldn't wrap their heads around how the woman who gave birth to Mimi could be the one to hurt her. Mimi's family was devastated. How could it be true? How could her own mom, the one person who should have loved her the most, have done something so terrible? Mimi's dad, Victor Torres, could hardly believe it. He had already been so hurt by how distant he felt from his daughter, but now he was being told that his daughter's mother had been the one to betray her. It was like a knife in his heart, twisting deeper with every new piece of information that came out. The truth hurt even more when people realized that Carla wasn't the only one responsible. Her sister, Jacqueline Garcia, was arrested too. Mimi had trusted them both, and now they were the ones who had failed her in the worst possible way. To make matters worse, there was Jonathan Anita, the man who had been close to their family. He was also arrested and charged with helping cover up what happened to Mimi. Each new arrest made the story even harder to believe. How could people so close to her, people who should have loved and protected her, have betrayed her? The town of New Britain was stunned. Everyone had known Carla as Mimi's mother. They had seen them around town, going to the store, walking to school, but no one ever suspected what was happening behind closed doors. Now, the community was left to process what had been hidden from them all along. It was heartbreaking to think that something so terrible could happen so close to home. As the investigation continued, more and more details came out. Police discovered that Carla had been hiding the truth about Mimi's death for months. Mimi's body had been kept hidden in the basement of their old home before it was moved to the abandoned house where it was finally found. The authorities revealed that Mimi had been abused for a long time, living in fear and suffering without anyone stepping in to help. It was a nightmare no one could have imagined. The investigation was like a terrible puzzle that was slowly coming together, piece by piece. And with each new discovery, the pain only grew. The people who were supposed to protect Mimi were the ones who had hurt her the most. It was a betrayal that no one could have expected. Carla, the woman who should have been her protector, had been the one to hurt her. And the worst part was that, by the time the truth was uncovered, it was too late for Mimi. The legal drama that followed was intense. Carla, Jacqueline, and Jonathan faced serious charges. Carla was charged with murder and cruelty to a child, while Jacqueline was also charged with cruelty to a child for her part in what happened. Jonathan was charged with tampering with evidence. The courtroom became a place of tension, where the family's grief was matched by the anger and heartbreak of the community. Everyone wanted to know why. Why did this happen? Why did Mimi, a sweet and innocent girl, have to go through so much pain? For Mimi's family, the betrayal felt even worse when the trial started. It was hard to hear the details, hard to understand that the woman who was supposed to love her had been the one to hurt her. The betrayal was something no one could ever truly heal from. The pain of losing Mimi was already unbearable, but to know that her own mother was the one who failed her in the worst possible way made it so much worse. A mother's betrayal. Jacqueline's final heartbreak. Those words hung in the air as the trial went on. It was a heartbreaking realization that Mimi, the little girl who deserved so much more, had been failed by the people who should have loved her the most. She had been betrayed by the very people who were supposed to keep her safe. As the investigation continued, people began to understand just how deep the betrayal went. It wasn't just about the moment of Mimi's death. It was about the months of suffering she had endured in silence, hidden away from the world. It was about the lies that had been told, and the truth that had been kept hidden for so long. For the community, for Mimi's family, and for everyone who knew her, the pain would never go away. They would always carry the weight of knowing that the person who should have loved Mimi the most had been the one who hurt her. They would never forget her, and they would never stop fighting for justice in her name. Mimi's story was a painful reminder that sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who can hurt us the most. And sometimes, justice is the only way to find the truth and start healing from the pain. The news of Mimi's death hit everyone like a hammer. It was like a dark cloud had come over New Britain, and no one knew how to escape it. Mimi wasn't just a name or a face to people. She was a friend, a neighbor, a daughter. She was a part of the community, and now that piece was gone. People didn't know what to say or how to feel, but one thing was certain. They were all grieving for the loss of a young girl who had so much life ahead of her. Mimi's family was completely crushed. Her father, Victor Torres, couldn't stop crying. He couldn't believe that his daughter, his little girl, was really gone. "I thought I would get to see her grow up," he said, his voice breaking. "She deserved so much more than this." His heart was shattered, and there was nothing he could do to put it back together. The pain of losing his daughter was something he would carry for the rest of his life. Mimi's mom, Carla, was in deep denial. She had always wanted the best for Mimi, or at least she tried to. But now, she had to face the fact that the person she was supposed to protect and love was gone forever. "I failed her," Carla whispered, looking down, tears falling from her eyes. "I failed my own daughter. I will never forgive myself." The guilt was eating her up inside. She wished, with all her heart, that she could go back and change things, but it was too late. Mimi's aunt, Jacqueline Garcia, was also devastated. She couldn't understand how it had happened. "How could this happen to her?" she asked, her voice trembling. "She was just a little girl. We should have protected her, and we didn't." The family's pain was overwhelming. They couldn't believe that a child who had so much to give, so much potential, was gone. The loss wasn't just felt by the family. It spread through the entire community. New Britain was a small town and everyone knew everyone. People who had seen Mimi walking to school, playing in the park, or helping her friends were now left with a deep emptiness. They couldn't understand how something so horrible could happen to a child in their town. The grief was heavy in the air, and it was hard for anyone to ignore. In the days after Mimi's body was found, the community came together to mourn. People left flowers and candles at the spot where her body had been found. They didn't know what else to do, but they wanted to show they cared. They wanted to honor the memory of a little girl who was taken too soon. Some people wrote messages like, "We miss you, Mimi," and "You will never be forgotten." It was a small way to show their love for her and their support for the family. But it meant a lot to everyone involved. There was a small memorial held in the park where Mimi used to play. People came from all over the town to remember her, to share their memories, and to express their sorrow. It was a sad day, but it was also a day when the community showed how strong they were together. They held each other, comforted one another, and promised to remember Mimi in their hearts forever. The family, though broken, leaned on the community for support. They needed help to get through the hardest time of their lives, and they found it in the people around them. Neighbors brought food, people offered to help with anything the family needed, and there were kind words shared everywhere. In a way, it was a reminder that no matter how tough things get, people can always come together to help each other. But even with all the love and support, the pain was still there. Mimi's family would never get her back, and the town would never be the same. A community lost a child, and a family lost its soul, one neighbor said. It was a beautiful way to put it, because that's exactly what happened. Mimi wasn't just a part of her family, she was a part of the whole community, and losing her left a hole that no one could fill. As time went on, people kept Mimi's memory alive. They talked about her, shared stories about her kindness, her smile, and how she made everyone feel important. The sadness would never go away, but at least they could remember the good things about her, the way she made people laugh, the way she cared for animals, and the way she lit up a room just by being there. Mimi's story became a reminder to the community that children need to be loved and protected. Her death was a tragedy, but it was also a call to action. People in New Britain and everywhere else began to ask themselves, what can we do to make sure this doesn't happen again? They couldn't bring Mimi back, but they could make sure that no other child ever had to suffer like she did. Mimi's family and the community would always feel the pain of her loss. But they also knew that, in some way, Mimi would always be with them. Her spirit, her kindness, and her memory would live on in their hearts forever. And even though she was gone, she would never, ever be forgotten. The pain of losing Mimi didn't end when her body was found. For her family, it was just the beginning of a long, difficult journey. They had to fight not only with their own heartbreak, but also with a legal system that seemed slow and complicated. They wanted justice for Mimi, but getting it wasn't going to be easy. The first thing they had to face was the reality that the people who were supposed to protect Mimi were the ones who hurt her the most. Her mother, Carla Garcia, and her aunt, Jacqueline Garcia, were both arrested. Carla, the person who should have loved Mimi the most, was now facing charges of murder and cruelty to a child. Her aunt, Jacqueline, was also charged with cruelty to a child. It was hard to believe that people in Mimi's own family, the ones who were supposed to take care of her, were the ones who had failed her so badly. But even though the arrests were made, the fight for justice wasn't over. Mimi's family had to go through months of court hearings, waiting for the day when the people who hurt Mimi would finally be held accountable for their actions. It was a long, painful process. Every day they had to relive the worst thing that had ever happened to them. Every hearing, every piece of evidence that came out, felt like another blow to their already broken hearts. As the trial went on, the family realized that this wasn't just about them. It was about something much bigger. It was about protecting other children. It was about making sure that no other child would have to suffer like Mimi did. The more the family learned about the abuse Mimi had gone through, the more they understood that this was part of a bigger problem: child abuse. It wasn't just something that happened to Mimi. It was happening to other kids too. The system that was supposed to protect children like her had failed. For Jacqueline's family, the road to justice was not just about making sure the people who hurt her paid for what they did. It was about making sure that no other child would have to go through what Mimi went through. They wanted to make sure that the system would be better, that people would listen to children, that they wouldn't be ignored or overlooked like Mimi had been. During the trial, there were many moments when it seemed like the fight might never end. Mimi's family had to sit through days of painful testimony, hearing about the awful things that had happened to her. They had to listen to the details of what Mimi had gone through in those final months, and each word felt like a stab in the heart. It was hard to imagine how much pain Mimi must have been in, and it was even harder to think about how no one stepped in to help her sooner. The family's grief was endless. Justice for Mimi wasn't just about the law. It was about making sure that no other child had to live through what she had. They knew that even if the people responsible were convicted, it wouldn't bring her back. For Jacqueline, justice may never be enough, but it's all we have left. It was a painful truth, but it was the only way to find some kind of peace. Even though justice couldn't bring Mimi back, it could help make sure that her story would not be forgotten. It could help raise awareness about the problem of child abuse, so that more people would understand how important it was to protect kids. The trial wasn't just about making sure that Carla, Jacqueline, and Jonathan were punished. It was about showing the world how important it is to listen to children and protect them. It was about telling everyone that no one should ever be allowed to hurt a child and get away with it. It was about standing up for kids who couldn't stand up for themselves, and making sure the system worked to protect them. For Mimi's family, the fight for justice was a way to honor her memory. They knew that no amount of punishment would make up for the loss of their sweet girl. No sentence could bring her back. But they also knew that standing up for what was right, standing up for Mimi's memory, was the only way to make sure that her death would mean something. They wanted her to be remembered for the kind, loving person she was, not just as the victim of a terrible crime. As the case went on, more people began to understand the pain and the need for change. The trial became bigger than just one family. It became a symbol of how important it is to protect children. It was a chance to make a difference, to make sure no other child would suffer like Mimi did. The fight wasn't easy. It wasn't quick. And for Mimi's family, it felt like it would never end. But every time they thought they couldn't take it anymore, they thought of Mimi. They thought of how much she deserved a better life, and they kept fighting, for her, for other children, and for justice.
In the end, they knew they couldn't bring Mimi back. But they could make sure her story was told. They could make sure that her life wasn't wasted, that the world would know what happened to her, and that something good could come from the tragedy. They could fight for justice, and they could fight for every child who needed someone to stand up for them.
Mimi's life was taken far too soon. She was only 12 years old, with so much potential and so many dreams. Her life had only just begun, and yet, in the blink of an eye, it was over. But even though she's no longer here with us, her story isn't finished. Her legacy lives on. Mimi's life still calls for justice. Her death reminded the world that we need to protect children and stand up against abuse, no matter where or how it happens. The pain of losing her is something that will never go away for her family and the people who loved her. But they know they can't let her be forgotten. They want her story to be a reminder to everyone about the importance of keeping kids safe and making sure that no child ever has to go through what Mimi did. In the days after her death, the community in New Britain came together in a way that showed just how much Mimi meant to everyone. People who knew her, and even those who didn't, came together to honor her memory. The town set up memorials in the park where she used to play. They placed flowers, candles, and pictures of Mimi, with little notes that said, "We miss you, Mimi," and "You'll never be forgotten." It was their way of saying goodbye to a little girl who had so much life in her, but also a way of making sure that her memory would always stay alive. The community also held a vigil in her honor. People gathered around, holding hands, lighting candles, and sharing stories about Mimi. They talked about how she would smile at everyone, how she was always kind, and how she made everyone around her feel special. They shared their love for her and their grief, knowing that even though she was gone, she had left a mark on their hearts that would never fade. The tears flowed, but so did the love. It was a sad time, but it was also a time for the community to come together and show just how much Mimi meant to them. Even though it hurt so much, Mimi's family knew they had to keep going. They knew that no matter how much pain they were in, they had to make sure that Mimi was remembered for the kind, loving person she was. They knew they couldn't let her be just another tragic story. They wanted her life to mean something, and in a way, it already did. It was because of her that the community woke up to the reality of child abuse. Mimi's story made people realize that they need to be more aware, more protective, and more caring for the children around them. The truth is, Mimi's story is not just about what happened to her. It's about what we can do to make sure it never happens to anyone else. We can all take a stand against abuse. We can make sure that children are protected, that they are loved, and that they have the safe, happy lives they deserve. Mimi may not have been able to speak up for herself, but her story can be the voice that calls for change. It can be the reason we all work harder to make the world a safer place for kids. If we remember Mimi and honor her memory, we can help make the world better. We can make sure no other child has to suffer like she did. We can learn from what happened to her and use that knowledge to help others. So, let's take a stand. Let's promise to speak up when we see something wrong. Let's promise to protect children who can't protect themselves. And most of all, let's promise to never forget Mimi, to always remember the girl who was taken from us too soon. Mimi may be gone, but her story will not be forgotten. Her memory lives on in every person who hears her story and vows to take action. We all have the power to make a difference, to protect kids, and to make sure no child ever has to suffer like Mimi did. Let's honor her by standing up for what's right and making the world a safer place for everyone. The fight for justice isn't over, and it's up to all of us to keep Mimi's memory alive. Mimi's story is a heartbreaking reminder that children need to be protected. Let's honor her memory by taking action. Speak up if you see something wrong. Stand up for children, and demand justice. No child should ever suffer like Mimi did. Together, we can make sure her story is never forgotten and help create a safer world for all kids. If this story has moved you, please help us spread the message by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Every like and share helps this video reach more people, raising awareness about the importance of protecting children and preventing abuse. The more people who see this, the more lives we can touch, and the stronger our voice becomes in the fight for justice. Your support could help save a child's life. Thank you for being a part of this important cause. Together, we can make a difference.